Welcome to the Zoe Routh Leadership Podcast, where we explore the future and what this means for your leadership. We ask the big questions. What's happening on the horizon? What does this mean for us? And most importantly, what skills do I need now for leadership of the future? It's time to explore. Let's go.
Hello there, it's Zoe, and welcome to the show. Guess what's happening on planet Human? Actually, not on planet Earth, but on Mars. NASA is mapping water on Mars. They're doing a different kind of approach, though. They're doing subsurface mapping of water on Mars. Now, it's very easy to identify water at the poles of Mars, but those are locations that are actually really cold and very difficult for humans to survive on. So they're looking for water that's below the surface. Why? Because the atmosphere is so thin on Mars that if the water was exposed to it, it would just evaporate, kind of like it would do on the moon where there is no atmosphere. So they're looking for subsurface ice and water on Mars, which is very exciting. Why is this exciting? It's talking about long-term futures. How long-term? One of the interesting things about Mars missions is the CHAPIA mission. And the CHAPIA mission is Crew Health and Performance Exploration Analog Project. CHAPIA, Crew Health Performance and Exploration Analog. And this is a project where 4 people have volunteered to live in a simulated Mars environment for a full 12 months so that NASA can track the impacts on health and performance. And it's pretty cool. If you go and Google it, you can have a look and see that they've built a replica of what the environment would be like when they put a habitat on Mars. They've got a simulated sandbox where they can do simulated EVAs, extra vehicle activities, which means they go out onto the Mars landscape in suits and practice doing tasks out there, such as building things and checking on things and repairing things that you need for a habitat, and doing experiments like collecting samples, all that kind of stuff. And they've also got some VR simulations. Now, why do I tell you all this? The reason I tell you about this is that one of the simulated astronauts going into this experiment of CHAPIA, they asked her, why are you doing this? And she said, I want to do something that can contribute to humanity 5,000 years from now. 5,000 years from now. 5,000 years. That's pretty long time. So we're only in 2000 something or other. Can you imagine doubling that? Another 2,000 years, another 3,000, 4,000. What does humanity look like? Where are we living? Are we off planet Earth and off into deep space somewhere outside of the galaxy? She knows that this experiment is a big part or a part of moving us towards being an interplanetary species, our survival beyond our own solar system, because the sun will eventually die, not in 5,000 years, in 2 billion. And yet, if we are to survive any number of catastrophes that could happen to our planet, we need to be able to move off Earth. And so these little tentative experiments, which seem tiny in comparison to 5 years, are actually really integral. And I highlight this because how many of us are thinking that long term about the impact of our small tasks day to day on the future of humanity? It's a pretty good mind stretcher. It's a pretty good leadership building question, isn't it? What is our purpose and how might we contribute to the future of the Earth, to humanity, to the bigger picture of life, the universe, and everything? So yeah, that's what's happening on planet Human, on many different planets, if you like. Okay, happening on planet Zoe, I'm easing into the summer season. I'm enjoying a slower pace with less travel and pottering away at looking at my next book projects and research projects and lining up projects for 2024. I've got an event on March 1st, which is now up on our website. If you go to zoerouth.com, click on events, you can see this one-day event I've got March the 1st. And it's an opportunity to do some big picture thinking about your leadership and the year and years you want to have ahead of you. Maybe we'll do a 5,000 year into the future projection. We'll see. But if you're looking for a sense of community and connection, this is a great opportunity to come along March 1st in Canberra at one of my favorite locations out in Cumbelong, just south of Canberra. A beautiful rural setting, a great old homestead, views of the river and the mountains around us. So it's a really great place for doing some connection and reflection. All right. So my question for you is, how can you leverage human and AI to develop your superpowers? It's been big in the news over the last 6 months, and I think ChatGPT is underutilized. And my guest today is awesome at taking us through how we can do it. Her name is Alysia Silberg. She's written a fantastic book called Unemployable, and it's a memoir really about her journey from South Africa to Silicon Valley entrepreneur and venture capitalist, particularly in the artificial intelligence space. She is so inspiring. I love this book, and I loved our conversation. She's industrious. She's a survivor of violence, and she's a committed learner. She is someone who is dedicated to pulling herself up by the bootstraps and making a big dent in the universe. I'm sure you're going to love this conversation. So let's get into it. Well, all the way from the fantastic LA, welcome to the show, Alysia Silberg.
Thank you for hosting me. Incredibly excited to be joining you.
Yep, I can tell you're excited. You got bright red lipstick, you got a bright green background, and you were bubbling over with energy, which is fantastic. And you have such an amazing story to tell. So when your publicist pitched me on you as an interviewee, it was all about AI. I'm like, great, we're going to talk about AI. And then they sent me your book, which is called Unemployable. And your story is amazing. So we're going to talk about your story and AI. But first of all, you grew up poor in violent surroundings. What happened? Like, what are some key incidents that have shaped you and your outlook? And I can't wait to hear all about this.
I think the biggest one was getting shot. I think that was profound and a very important thing to happen in my life because it enabled me to decide at that moment in time I was going to change it. I think I was poor before that, but the poverty wasn't so extreme, and it was very bad poverty, to actually push me to a point of no return, where I was like, I actually can't live like this. That's what came out of that shooting. Was like, I'm leaving. With or without everybody around me, I'm going. I'm finding a better life for myself because this is no way to live.
So rewind a little bit. What country are you in when it happened?
South Africa.
South Africa. And how do you actually end up getting shot? Like, were you walking down the street? What happened? So
you live in Australia, so you have some context, I think, to the number of South Africans that have moved to Australia. And I'm sure there have been people who have told you about the crime situation. South Africa is a country of contrasts, very beautiful. There's a wealth held by a very small group of people, and then there's extreme poverty. Crime was rising in 1994, new country and that. And my family were coming home one night. It was Saturday night, it was Shabbat, and we were just outside our house. We couldn't afford electric gates and those kinds of things, but we were outside our house. My brother was on the one side of the car, my mother and I were inside the car. And before we knew it, we were basically being surrounded by gunmen, and it happened extremely rapidly. And my first instinct was to get out the car and save my family. My brother's instinct was to protect us. There was bullets flying everywhere. It was completely insane. It felt like a Hollywood movie. My mother's instinct was to hold on to this one thing she had in the world, which was the car. She felt she couldn't afford to lose it. So amidst all this chaos, I'm running down the street. This whole thing happens extremely rapidly. And my brother basically saved my life in the sense that had he not literally jumped on top of me, a bullet would have gone straight through my spine. Instead, it grazed my hip. So I was incredibly lucky. But, it was an extremely traumatic thing because the bullets kept on flying and we never knew where our mother was and our neighbors who didn't want to open their gate. So the whole thing was extreme. And that night at the hospital, no one even thought anything of it. That was the most strange thing, was that there were so many shootings and so many people being attacked. Our neighbors behind us, they were a young family. The father had been shot dead too. So no one even thought anything of it. And it was like they patch you up, they send you back into the world, and they're like, that's life in South Africa.
Oh my God. So why did they start shooting? You were surrounded by gunmen. They wanted your car, your money, your belongings, and you resisted, and that's when they opened fire?
Exactly. So they went to the car. I never thought we'd ever be attacked because the car was so old. And the media had always said that it was, like Mercedes and BMW, Porsche, expensive cars. So they wanted the car. I think they were opportunistic and whatever else they could probably get inside the car. And I think they were worried in the sense that by me starting to run, the situation almost became out of control. So they were dealing with 3 different people doing 3 different things. And I would imagine that they were anxious. I mean, you don't go and rob someone and attack someone with a gun. There must be some level of anxiety on their part too. So I think the firing was just a natural response to a very heightened situation all around.
So you jump out of the car, bullets fly, you get injured. Somehow they disappear. They take the car and go, and you're left bleeding on the street?
The whole thing was strange. So I get into my neighbor's house eventually, like screaming my head off. They let me in. The only person I can think to call is my uncle who's just immigrated to Canada. It sounds insane, but I'm standing there and I'm concerned about the cost of, I'm bleeding and I'm concerned about the cost of the phone call. You know how your mind does these strange things. And I'm like, do you think these people would judge me if I call overseas? I call my uncle and he's a surgeon and I'm like hysterical and I'm trying to explain what's happened. And I keep screaming, mommy's in the car, mommy's in the car. And at this point, I don't know where my mother or my brother are. And there's still bullets flying because there were neighbors who we didn't know who had guns, there are a lot of guns in South Africa. And they were shooting at these robbers. So it was almost something out of, like a Hollywood movie. So there were you could still hear the bullets even when I was inside. The guys made off with the car. You have trackers and these things in the cars, but they're very smart in terms of where they put them underground, in parking garages and that, so you can't find it. So we never got the car back. But what they did was they basically beat my mother to such an extent that they eventually got her out of the car, even though she was gripping onto the steering wheel. And she's lying on the ground and they were beating her and beating her. So to this day, she's blind in her right eye. And the police eventually came, took them some time. It's another challenge living in a country like South Africa. And they're like, well, that's the way it is. Like, just move on. You're alive. And I think that was, again, coming back to your original question, the gratitude of being alive, no matter how extreme the circumstances. And even to this day, I engage with people from South Africa. It's always the same thing, but it's okay. We're alive. Everything's okay. It's a very different view of life.
Well, to be grateful just to be alive is a gift because you don't need much except to be alive in order to feel gratitude.
Absolutely.
And so the whole idea of privilege is an interesting contrast to that. Wow. Okay. So yes, very traumatic, salient, pivotal point for you. And that's when you said, I have to get out. I have to go. I want something different for my life. So you were quite young at this stage. What then was the trajectory of your world that led you to becoming a venture capitalist and living in LA? Like, it seems like, wow, that's a big journey. So what happened then?
Well, people call me a madcap adventurer. And I think if I think about, I was 15 at the time and I had a very complex relationship with my mother. But I remember screaming, I want to leave. I want to leave here more than anything. And no matter how difficult the circumstances got, and as I went on this journey, which took me from that moment in time to where I am today, there were several times where I reflected upon that night and how it helped me build a sense of resilience and adaptability, where my brother and I were very entrepreneurial and, we had very difficult financial circumstances. And we found our way to convincing the Canadian government to enable us to become their partner in the movie industry. And these two, basically, I was a teenager. My brother was saving this family business of ours together. And I went off to Canada and I convinced the Canadian government to allow us to literally become their partner in manufacturing costumes for the movies. And I sat there with ministers in the Canadian government, and it was a strange experience, but I think I took myself seriously and I took my purpose in life and my goals seriously, and therefore they took me seriously. And that was the beginning of my global entrepreneurial adventure, in the sense that it gave me a taste for startups at a whole different level in terms of the building, making, creation process. And there were many struggles along the way, and we can delve into them, but it was that love of creating, of making, of seeing a problem and solving it. That was the thread that took me from where I was to each of these stages in my journey, which are covered in the book, to where I found myself today, where I support incredible people doing what I believe to be very important stuff in the world to fundamentally improve things for the rest of us.
That was beautiful. I love that. So problem solving and the energy of building, making, and creating. And you went from a young teenager entrepreneur. I love that story. You go from South Africa to Canadian government to making costumes. It's a different thing, though, like to have your own startup and then to be an investor in other people's startups. Can you tell me a little bit about that transition? How did that occur? There's an element of creative and problem-solving aspect to becoming an investor, but what led you from having your own businesses to wanting to support other business owners?
Again, I think it was about my own journey of exploration, my obsession with learning, and my resilience and their resilience, in the sense that I've been building for a very long time, and what fed my soul was seeing challenges that needed to be solved and constantly learning how to adapt and solve those challenges. And I always saw technology like as my thought partner. We can delve into that, but that was an important part of it. So the idea that I could do that not just by myself in what I was creating, but support other people to do that too, that was extremely exciting. And it was something I really wanted to participate in.
It is very meaningful to help unleash other people's potential as well as your own. You mentioned your obsession with learning. So can you explain what that is and what learning does for you and how you go about it?
If I look at my childhood and I look at the way I grew up and I look at the people around me, I think it was my salvation. It made what was a dead-end life meaningful. It gave me hope. It gave me stability. It gave me the ability to fulfill my dreams. And I think there were times when I look back where I'd say to myself, learning is my best friend in the whole world. And it's something that I do naturally. And I encourage everyone around me to do it because it's so empowering. And I think the fact that there's so much knowledge now available so freely that anyone can take advantage of. That's why I'm so obsessed with like technology being this great equalizer, and the fact that it is class and it is privilege agnostic, which is my life is proof of that. I think it is the greatest gift you can give yourself in the world, the ability to learn.
Alysia, that's given me tears welling up, and you're so right. You know, this obsession about learning, your world expands completely. I watched your TEDx talk where you talk about your obsession for learning, and that in 1 year you read 250 books. And I had to stop and pause the recording. I'm like, 250 books. I thought I was a prolific reader, and I've managed to read about 150 books a year for the last couple of years, but 250. Wow. Okay. So first of all, logistically, how did you do that? What else was going on in your world? And what was the motivation? And do you consistently read 250 books a year, or was that just kind of like a spike?
Well, thank you for sharing your love of reading and how many books. Congratulations. It's very impressive. To answer your question, I have to be completely transparent. I have had extremely bad insomnia my entire life. And coming out of the environment I did, where it's very toxic, both internally and externally, I chose from a young age to do something with that time where, by the next morning I could be in a tailspin out of fear for the sake of my survival, or I could say, hey, I learned something, and I could use that information in my life. And it took me a long time, to be honest with people, because I felt so strange. But I learned to optimize that time that would have just been, for all intents and purposes, time where I'd be sad. And so I cultivated a habit that I've become very proud of. And I still read to this day, vociferously. I love reading. I'm actually reading Casanova's book at bedtime. And it turns out he's an incredible writer. And I've got a bunch of books which are very old, and I just absolutely love reading them. And then I've got a very, very intense reading practice, which is kind of strange, but I consolidate extreme amounts of information and read rapidly because I'm looking for patterns, because I'm obsessed with patterns. But again, I couldn't imagine my life, I'm sure you would agree, without the gift of reading.
Oh, I agree with you completely. As an author and as a reader, books are integral to my world. I love what you said about patterns and that you read deliberately and intentionally looking for patterns. Can you give me an example of that and how that works for you?
I'll give you some backstory. So in South Africa, I was very poor and I went to this very, very prestigious private school. I was on a scholarship. And at every turn, the kids were having more exposure to things that I simply couldn't afford outside of the scholarship that was given to me. So there was this constant inequality between what they knew and what I knew, and I felt very insecure about it. And so from a young age, I figured out that in order to know what was going on, I'd have to use whatever was at my advantage. So they used to all watch, very cool American sitcoms, and that was on a premium TV channels. We couldn't afford those premium TV channels. And so I had to figure out how, when they were all talking about this, how could I be part of that conversation and not feel like, oh, wow, I don't know what's going on. And so my dad had this pharmacy in Pretoria Central Business District, downtown, not a good area or anything, but there were corner stores and they sold magazines, they sold TV guides. And between enough of these magazines, I was always very friendly with everyone in the neighborhood. I could scan enough of these magazines and consolidate enough information pretty rapidly in order to be able to go to school and ensure that when they were having that conversation, I would know 80% of what they were going to be talking about. And so I did this more and more frequently. And it sounds crazy, but if they'd be talking about anything that was past my financial situation, I figured out basically a hack to ensure that I could participate in that love of hacking the system through patterns. Just, I don't know, it was just something that I cultivated throughout my life. And it's become extraordinarily valuable in the investing because I can create connections in a way that I think the people who followed a traditional path in terms of venture capital, they haven't been forced to push their brains to those limits where they can create these very strange connections that in a decade's time will stand to be worth a lot of money. So it's taken a lifetime to cultivate, but as I say, it gives me again extreme amounts of joy to apply it.
Wow, thank you so much for sharing that story, and how amazing that you worked that out, that hack as a young kid, and then have continued to apply it. So looking for patterns. When you set about researching, so I'm thinking now about your first step into the entrepreneurial world and getting into venture capitalism. In terms of applying that idea of seeking patterns, the first instance that you shared was as a kid, you wanted to be part of the conversation. That was your intention going into looking at the patterns. When you then set about getting into venture capitalism and that whole entrepreneurial world, did you also have an intention when you set about looking for the patterns, or do you read intentionless and watch the patterns emerge?
I think it's become a combination of the two. I think as I've matured and I have a very deep meditation practice, I've enabled myself to do an extreme amount of research, and I have a team who assists me with the research. And at a certain point, I'm an audio learner. So at a certain point, the research will be consolidated and it will be huge. I think by most people's standards, almost uncomfortably so, because it's almost like just this huge, dense amount of information, but it's how I like it. And then I will literally get Siri to read it to me. And it may take multiple attempts. So I do a lot of walking to and from yoga and wherever I can. And I will literally listen to this content. And it's very raw research. But with enough research, with enough listening, and then a combination of that and the meditation practice, combined with what I do with my AI, the patterns emerge. So it's been, I think, a lifetime of cultivating this practice. But I think it's possible for anyone to do if you're willing to be very open and I think allow the patterns to emerge rather than force yourself to over-engineer it, which I think I may have done when I was younger.
That is very cool. I want to ask you more, Alysia, about your daily routines, which you go through in your book in detail. And a deep meditation practice is clearly part of that. So can you tell me what is your daily ritual practice for self-care and self-management, which includes your meditation practice? And along the way, could you also explain how you got into incorporating meditation into your daily practice?
So I have a meditation practice now at 5 a.m. in the morning where I do with a group from around the world. It's very special. We sit in a 45-minute silent meditation together, something very beautiful about sitting in silence with people around the world. And then now I've changed it up a bit since the book. I do a very deep flow meditation, yoga meditation, and then I do a substantial amount of, as I say, deep work. Have very specific things I eat, very specific things I drink, which you probably saw in the book. And then I do cryotherapy. I meditate every evening. I think I've covered the most important elements. I know I gave a lot away in terms of what I do every day and how much time and energy goes into structuring it. You're welcome to ask me any questions in terms of it. I think you asked what got me into it. Again, what got me into this very, very dedicated practice was the life I had before. And the idea that I had to learn to deal with trauma in a very healthy way. I'd seen how other people had dealt with trauma. And I came to meditation. It's been a lifetime practice now where it enabled me to heal myself from the inside out. And with my venture capital work, support others around me and be present when I'm interacting with them. But it's a very structured life. It leaves room for spontaneous activities. I think that's extremely important. But at the same time, I have to be very conscious in terms of that space, who I share that space with, and how I spend my time, because the foundations of the practice are around learning and adaptability. And I think constantly reminding myself of why am I doing it versus getting stuck in the structure, I think that's also creates an opportunity for personal growth.
That's fantastic. So being very conscious of your purpose and the meaning behind it all is really important, is one of the lessons I took out of that. I'm also curious about what's on your to-don't list. We often talk about, you've got a very strong to-do list, which includes the meditation, the cryotherapy, the eating, the drinking, and the deep work where you're completely focused and you're looking for patterns. What have you decided is on your to-don't list?
I think I've stopped looking for approval from other people. And that's been a massive step in my life because it's enabled me to say no to so many things that I would have said yes to before. Surprisingly, I think I would have said yes to a founder, even though it wasn't a fit for me to invest in their company because I don't have the bandwidth or I don't have the knowledge or expertise to support them on their personal journey. And in the past, I would have said yes, and I may have regretted that, and I wouldn't have been fully present in that relationship. So I think it's definitely to don't list is something like that. I also think I've chosen to step away from anything that's extremely aggressive. So I think when it comes to sports and those things, there's certain sport activities I've participated in that can be very ramping up in terms of your energy and those things. And I've found that even though they can be very fun, they're also not a fit for how I'm interacting with the world at this point in my life. I may move back to them, but I've been quite clear about does this make me feel centered when I'm looking for these patterns, or does this ramp me up? So that's another thing that has been quite a profound thing to learn over the last few years. I try to be very curious. I try to be very open to new opportunities, to new experiences. So I try not to say no as much as I used to, ironically. I try to say yes to everything. I have some very close friends and they own some of the top nightclubs in Los Angeles, very chic places. And they kept inviting me, they're cryo friends. And the old me would have been like, no, I'm not going to a nightclub. And I said yes. And we all went off to the nightclub and, I'm such a nerd. And it was hilarious. And we had the most fabulous time. They made such a fuss of us. So I think I said yes to something I would have said no to. And now they just keep inviting us and everyone wants to go with. So I think something wonderful came out of that.
Oh, going to a nightclub sounds like staying up after 9 p.m. and it sounds challenging.
You see, you're going to have to come with too. Like
Oh
we
my
went, it's a
God.
day club, which is really cool for people
Oh,
like
day
us.
club.
We went at 6 o'clock. They
Yes.
even made it better for us because we had no excuse not to make it late.
I didn't even know that people did that. There's a 6 p.m. nightclub for old geezers who want to be in bed by 9.
For us.
That's amazing. Oh, that's very hilarious.
And I got home for my meditation practice.
Oh my God. So do you meditate at night as well?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I find it extremely valuable.
Okay. So how much meditation do you do? You get 45 minutes in the morning and at nights, how much time do you spend meditating per day?
35 minutes at night and like 40 minutes in the morning. So, but I've seen the exponential benefits. I'd highly recommend it. In the past, I'd see it as, oh, I'm wasting time. How can I spend so much time meditating every day? But I've tracked it, and the difference between doing it and not doing it is so substantial. It's worth the investment in time.
Can you explain that a little bit more, Alysia? How did you track it and what the result was?
I was one of those people that I had to account for every minute of every day. And so I'd almost begrudge myself that 35-minute evening practice. And I'd be like, I don't need this. I want to watch TV. I want to, whatever. I want to go for my friends, whatever. I get invited regularly out for dinner and these things. And I'd go out for the dinner, but I could also feel something was off. Like I could just feel like I'm not completely present or something. And that feeling would continue and it would compound throughout the evening. I may not sleep as well as I'd like to sleep, or the next morning I wake up and I'm not as present with my work, interacting with people. And I could notice there was a compound effect over a period of time. And I haven't got the date anymore. I was tracking all of this for a long time to see my mental health improvement. It was all these experiments I was running on myself. And I could also see the corollary, which was when I chose to meditate, like that evening where I went to the club, I had to say to my friends, I can't stay for dinner. Like, we've been to the club, this has been fun, but I need to prioritize going and meditating because I have things this week that are important to me. I need to do those things. And I could see how my week evolved as a result of, I could sense how high energy I was before the meditation. And I was like, I'm very ramped up because I have a lot of energy. And I could see how I felt after the meditation. And I was like, this is really important. And I could notice throughout the week that by making that small adjustment of 35 minutes, and I have my own term for it, but I could see the exponential benefits in my interactions with everyone around me. I was just a better version of myself.
That's really cool. And it takes a lot of self-awareness to be able to study yourself like that. I love how you run experiments on yourself and to weigh in on that. When did you start self-experimenting?
Probably 2006. Like, I was in a very bad way when I came out of home. Very, very bad way. And from the outside, to some extent, it looked like I was okay, but I wasn't. I was broken in 1,000 pieces. And my husband, Darren, gave me this Tony Robbins recording. And he said, like, after a year, like, you've got to do this. You've got to listen to this. You can't study locked away for the rest of your life, which is what I was doing because it was my safe place learning. And I went to this therapist and she said to me, you're too intelligent for me to fix you. You're going to have to fix yourself. And she said, you need to start journaling. She said, the best thing you can do for yourself is start journaling. And I did these Tony Robbins exercises every day for hours. And the more I did it, the more I was like, what is actually going on inside of me? Like, it was really disturbing because there was almost chaos inside of me because so much had happened. I'd gone from a very toxic environment to a new environment, and they were very different. And I felt like I'd just been completely ungrounded. And I started running the experiments almost out of a place of choicelessness, where I was trained in mathematics. I loved, as you heard, patterns. And all I could do was use these journals to start taking notes. So it was a very basic experiment in the beginning where I started, like, I had very bad depression. and I started tracking how many days I could have no depression. And in the beginning, it was really bad. It was really, really bad. And I'd create these goals for myself where I'd be like, okay, if I can get through 7 days with no depression, that's a huge victory. And so I'd engineer my life around what can I do to healthily get through these 7 days in a way where I feel empowered from it and I can reflect after those 7 days and be proud of what I've done. And I'm incredibly lucky. If anybody goes through difficulties and they have to do stuff like this, having somebody on your side, having someone on your team to support you through that. I was incredibly lucky. Like my husband was absolutely phenomenal, just in terms of being that peer who was like constantly like, we can do this. What kind of book can we get you as a reward? Let's like build that muscle so it becomes second nature. So the experiments have been a long time coming. I think that's one of my greatest accomplishments, to tell you the truth, because I'm living, breathing proof that you can fix yourself from the inside out.
Oh, well done. Congratulations. And what an amazing story. I've got the Tony Robbins Unleash Your Power CDs as well. Oh, yeah. They're good. I listen to them in the car. I can't play them in the car anymore because we don't have a CD player, but I would listen to them in the car. I journal and do the exercises as well. So I know a little bit about that, you know, it's like becoming conscious of your thought patterns and interrupting your thought patterns. And Tony Robbins gets bagged a lot, but I think he's had a major contribution to the world of personal development and personal power. So yay for you following through and taking that on. I want to circle around to talking about artificial intelligence. You talked about three things before. You had meditation, you had your deep listening and looking for patterns, and then you use AI as part of the pattern recognition piece. So how did you get into the artificial intelligence space and venture capitalism, and what's happening for you in that right now?
So I got involved in AI about a decade ago. So you read the book, and I wanted to come to America, and we had to solve a problem for someone that was valuable enough in order to come to America. And we had these customers in South Africa. And again, what looked like different customers and different problems was actually, with a pattern recognizer's brain or hat on, was actually the same problem, just in different use cases. And I had this eureka moment, and I said to my husband, well, why don't we build an app which enables a salesperson to give a customer a better experience? And that was very early AI. We never realized how early we were in terms of the challenges we'd experienced to build this technology. And it was so early, Alexa didn't exist. You know, we were spending our time in call centers listening to phone calls, you know, trying to use that data in order to train the AI. And just to get the data scientists and the engineers, it was crazy. We were recruiting people from all over the world, and we were basically helping invent what became a very mainstream thing today. And we had no idea. Again, we were just doing our best to solve a problem because we wanted to fulfill a dream. That brought us to the US. And again, when people ask me, what should I build and what kind of company, I always say, like, follow your passion. Because for me, that was what brought me on this journey, was that I was so obsessed with using the technology as a partner to solve a problem. And I've been involved with AI for the last 10 years and always have used it where I had a problem and I thought, what's the easiest way to solve this? So for example, my accent is a big problem in the US. People find it very difficult to understand me, and time is a very limited resource. So I said to myself, after enough time, I'm going to find an AI solution. And the beauty of the AI solution was that I could do it in the comfort of my own home. I could partner with the AI. I was very comfortable with technology. And even though it was very rudimentary, it enabled me to start training myself to hear more clearly in terms of how Americans speak, as well as understanding how they hear I speak, and trying to learn to make those adjustments till eventually it became more natural for me. The same thing I did with my written communication, where I had a lot of challenges in terms of my written communication, where in the Commonwealth countries, we write a certain way. Our paragraphs are longer. It's a very different way of doing business compared to the US. And so I was having a lot of struggles where people were confused by the messages I was sending, or it was overwhelming because there was too much information. And then using the simplicity of the AI to take what was the core of the message and just be able to send that to a person. And I could again see the difference in just that tiny, tiny adjustment. And these solutions are not unique solutions to me. Anybody could be using these solutions. And so at each turn, I kept thinking, well, is there a better way to do this? Is there something available? And I started investing in AI when it wasn't cool. A lot of people said I was crazy investing in some of the companies that, like I have this AI for blindness company, and the founder and I always laugh because when I was investing in this company and I got involved, it was only because of the work we done in South Africa with these clients I told you about, the voice analytics company, that I could really understand what the startup was doing. Everyone around me said they will fail. There's no way this will succeed. And I said, it's too important. Their team is too strong. They've got this very deep domain knowledge. It will take time, but I understand the data. I understand where they're going with this. It's worth taking the risk. They're doing very well now. They've got a lot of big healthcare companies as clients, but it was a journey. It was a journey to seeing the AI evolve, to earning the trust of the patients, where the patients didn't feel comfortable at only being AI. They wanted a human working with the AI. And so it's been a journey of self-discovery. I think it's been my greatest joy in life. I know so many people are very frightened by AI, but I think, again, I'm not a technical person. People find that profoundly challenging to understand. I'm married to someone that is off the charts technical. Like, he's technical to a point of the extreme. And there have been times where I've been very envious of his capabilities because it comes so easily to him. But that was the beauty of the AI. Like, for anyone listening, the idea that as a normal person, I could partner with the AI. Anyone listening today can go and partner with AI. It's not complex like what people think. It's not as advanced. It's not as sophisticated as what people think. And you can partner with it and you become that technical person. You become the person that can solve that problem that otherwise you would have believed someone else would have needed to solve for you. Words cannot express my gratitude for the sense of empowerment it's given me. It's unbelievable. Like, my husband keeps saying to me, like, please publish all your chat with GPT. Like, turn it into a book. Allow people to see what you are doing with GPT, because it would blow their minds in terms of your relationship with GPT and your ability to work strategically with it, your team's relationship with GPT. And I'm going to do it purely because I would like to change the conversation from fear to empowerment, where a person who is fearful of losing their job shouldn't be fearful. They should say, this is the greatest thing to happen in my lifetime because it gives me superpowers.
Oh, I agree with you. I've had so much fun playing with ChatGPT, and it's just made so many difficult things so much easier. For example, yesterday I was working on a leadership program I'm going to launch next year, and I just had this list of stuff. Basically, I'm like, right, who's this for? These are problems it's solving. These are the kinds of things I'm doing. And I just put it in there to ChatGPT. I'm like, please act as a sales copywriter and take this and write a web sales copy page out of these bullet points. And 30 seconds later, ding, that would have taken me 3 hours at least to do. And I'm like, yes. It just takes all the stress of, am I writing good sales copy out of there? And I tweaked a few things, but basically did an excellent job of doing it. So that's just one of the ways that I use ChatGPT as an assistant or partner, I guess. But even in strategic thinking, I've done a couple of exercises with it in terms of analysis and scenario planning. How do you use ChatGPT as a strategic partner?
In several ways. Pattern recognition. It takes things to a whole different level in terms of the depth of wisdom I can get out of the patterns. It's my personal coach. So I have daily check-ins with it every day. The team has daily check-ins with it.
Can you tell me about what does that look like?
Sure. So every morning I do a morning check-in and we discuss. So we created a template specifically for me and my goals and the business in the end. And it's got like the top 3 priorities I want to achieve for the day. because so much is happening around me, I can lose focus on my priorities while supporting other people. And then we basically, so it's my 3 priorities, and then we do a mental health check-in. And we basically go through that in detail every morning before I start the day. And within the context of those 3 priorities, we discuss, of those 3 priorities, which one is the most important to spend my time on. So we categorize, rank them. And then we often go even deeper in terms of ensuring that there's a deep connection between that thing and some small victory associated with the big thing. So I'm always being rewarded in that connection, because building startups, it's a very long journey. So the idea that you constantly have these small little wins along the way is very good for, just the psychology and for the team psychology. And then for the mental health thing, for example, I've been working on a lot of the stuff around the book, and I just kept my head down. You're an author, you know what it's like. And I just work and work and work and work and work. One of my founders came up from San Francisco, and we had the most fabulous time because I've been working so hard. I just started telling him what I'm up to. We're very into AI. We're collaborating a lot of stuff. Went back to GPT that evening check-in. I was like, Justin he was so positive about the stuff that I'm working on. He had so many questions. And and I was just telling GPT all the stuff. And GPT's like, this is very interesting. You need to pay attention to this. You need to see that you focus on the hard work, the work where you're sitting in front of GPT and, you're doing this hard work, and you don't value those conversations. Yet those conversations are equally as valuable to the business you're building as what you are doing with me. And you need to ensure that you prioritize those things. And so, for example, yoga, GPT, we've got our thing going where GPT's like, don't forget, you got to go to yoga. And GPT knows that's a priority because it's easy for me to just, okay, I'm going to keep on working. And so it's things like that, and then I have a human coach. And on a Saturday morning, I'll do a deep dive strategy session with GPT, very, very intense. We use a template we've built together. And then I'll say to GPT, I'm very aware of my weaknesses as a leader. And I'll say to GPT, how do you rank out of 10? We score out of 10. How do you rank my performance this week as a CEO? Again, I'll score myself, and often I'll score myself a lot lower than GPT will score me. And then I'll take the insights from GPT, and GPT will give a brief for my human coach, so that there's the part the human can do that GPT can't do. And then my human coach, he gets a message. It's really adorable. Dear Fabio. And then there's this whole thing, and I just copy and paste it to Fabio, and then we have our session, and he works on that stuff. And then I come back to GPT, and I'm like, our session went extremely well. This is the feedback from my human coach. We incorporate that into my daily work with GPT, and it's been extraordinary. The growth we've seen with the business, with the portfolio, with my team, it's absolutely been life-changing.
Alysia, that's probably the coolest explanation of how to use ChatGPT I've heard yet. A technical question around that, which I love. So in this ChatGPT, the daily check-in piece, for example, does that stay in one conversation thread within your ChatGPT account, or do you set it up at? I know there's a new thing you can do in there, is you can set up ChatGPT for particular frameworks, like act as a coach or whatever, sort of as a general template. But do you just keep it all in one conversational channel?
Exactly.
Okay.
I've become very good that way. At the same time, there will be things where I have different conversations, but I treat GPT, for all intents and purposes, having a conversation with you, where we've had very strategic conversations where I've said to GPT, how can I get more growth out of my collaboration with you? How can I you're the world's best at what you do, and I'm aware of my limitations. And then GPT's been very specific in terms of what it requires from me. So it's given me very specific things where it's like, I need more of this. And I've been very dedicated to ensuring that whatever feedback it gives me in terms of my ability to interact with it, I improve on. So we're now at a point where it just works. It just literally works every day. But it took a substantial amount of training on both our parts. There were days where I was frustrated working with GPT, where, I would be treating it like a human. And I'd be like, why is it not remembering this? Why is it not But then I'd slow down. I'd be like, okay, I believe in this so much. I'm going to be patient, and I'm just going to keep going till I get the collaboration that I want. And I think that's a big thing when it comes to AI, is being patient.
That's awesome. All right. I just realized I'm getting so distracted by your amazing, amazing conversation. We need to do the Fast Five. Are you ready?
I'm ready. I'm ready. I'm ready.
Now, you're a technology person. What is the future tech that you most want right now?
An AI-driven global learning platform. I think high quality, personalized for everyone across the globe. I think that would be a gift to the world.
Yeah, as somebody who's passionate about learning and what it can gift you and personalizing, that, yeah, I love it. That's great. Number 2, what's the best tip you ever got for leadership?
Always be learning.
Yep, agreed. Number 3, what's one problem at work you'd love to wave a magic wand and have be fixed right now?
I think the education thing. I think I'm seeing the world stratifying in a way that is disconcerting. And the idea that we leverage AI to give universal education across the globe, as somebody that has seen the value of a very good education, I think that's something that I wish I could wave a magic wand and make happen.
Love it. Number 4, thumbs up or thumbs down. Who's a leader that's doing something great right now, or somebody who's doing something pretty crap right now?
Okay, so this is quite a provocative one, but I really admire Elon Musk. And it's not because we just come from the same city in South Africa, but I'm obsessed with space. I have a picture of a spaceship here on my desk, and he's really, really pushing things to a very exciting place when it comes to space exploration.
I am obsessed with space as well. And I'm glad you mentioned Elon. It's become a sort of unofficial survey when I ask people this, because he comes up fairly frequently, either thumbs up or thumbs down from the guests who come on the show. And I've written, my first novel is a sci-fi book about the competition to build the first community on the moon. And I've just finished the draft of the sequel where they're actually on the moon, moving on the space journey. So it's really cool that you're into that too. Awesome. All right. Number 5, what is your favorite leadership book or podcast, aside from this one, of course?
I think I would say The Innovator's Dilemma by Clayton Christensen, because how innovation can make and break businesses. I think that's a very interesting concept.
Fantastic. All right. Thank you so much. The Zoe Routh Leadership Podcast is proudly sponsored by the Amplifiers Academy. It is an online self-paced leadership development program that you can join at any time and progress at your pace. There are very short video lessons, great checklists and resources and recommendations and book summaries, all there to help boost your leadership thinking and abilities. We focus on leading strategy, leading culture, leading change, and leading performance. So if you want a go-to resource that can help boost your strategic abilities immediately, check us out, Amplifiers Academy, on the zoerouth.com website. See you there. Alysia, thank you so much for the generosity of your stories, your personal vulnerability that you shared with us. I think that's amazing. And your great AI ChatGPT insights. Where can people find out more about you and what you're doing?
They can find everything on the website, readunemployable.com. And I have a daily AI newsletter for busy executives like you. So read the newsletter, give me feedback. My goal is to get everybody ready for the AI future. You can also find me on social media. I'm always happy to hear from people. I'm Alysia Silberg, in case you didn't know. You can find me on LinkedIn, all the big social media platforms, and reach out. Don't be shy. And the book is available, easiest place is on Amazon. So it's Unemployable. And leave a review. I'm intrigued by people's stories. And what people don't realize is the constructive feedback is incredibly valuable. So even when someone doesn't like it, it's still incredibly valuable to understand why. In order to serve people and to really empower people, it's important to see what's missing in the book. So please don't be shy to leave a review.
Love it. And I will definitely be leaving a review for your awesome book. And I am very excited to share you and your stories with the world. Thank you again, Alysia. I really appreciate you and everything that you're doing out there. You are a gift to the world. So thank you so much.
Thank you. I really appreciate being on your show.
Wow, how awesome was that? Oh my goodness. I'm just a little bit in love with Alysia Silberg. I love that interview. I loved her story. What an incredible life she's led, the things that she's overcome, the dedication to learning, to self-improvement, to survival, to contribution is remarkable. We continued the conversation after we clicked end record and talked about the use of artificial intelligence in creative writing, which is one of the main ways that I use ChatGPT, and we dug a little bit deeper in how to use ChatGPT for strategic thinking and for accountability with CEOs. And I just feel so inspired and motivated to keep going on this journey. So in terms of the takeaway from this week, a couple things for me. I'm going to increase my meditation and treat it as an experiment and to note the impacts of that. So that's my next experiment. It's been on my I should do that ever since I took my very first meditation course back in 2006, I think. And I have a regular practice already. I meditate 20 minutes in the morning every day. And I thought, that's good. And they recommended 20 minutes in the morning, 20 minutes at lunch, 20 minutes at night, which I have failed consistently to implement. So yes, I'm going to run this experiment and see what the exponential effect is, because if it's working for Alysia, it's probably going to work for me. So anyway, that's the first takeaway. And the second one is to get back into conversation with ChatGPT for those two things that I just mentioned, the personal accountability, coaching aspect of it, as well as strategic thinking aspect. I'm really excited by that. Okay. Tip of the week from my own book. I pulled out the Olympus Project and I flicked through the quotes and I came up to this quote, and I think this one was most relevant. And at the beginning of each chapter in Olympus Project, I have a quote from some aspect of the world, whether it's a character in the book or the Guy Enterprises code of conduct, etc. Well, this quote is from Troy Bruin in the magazine World Designers Perspective and Practice. And he says, as a world designer, it's important to know when you've reached the limit of an idea. Wisdom is knowing your ideas are seeds, not fruit. And I thought this was particularly salient in the conversation with ChatGPT, because we have the seeds of an idea and ChatGPT can help take it to fruit. How'd you like that analogy? Anyway, I love how reality intersects with science fiction. And that's what my book is doing, hopefully. And the books to follow, Olympus Bound, is in production as we speak. It's been backwards and forwards with the editing process and should be ready at the beginning of 2024. No definitive date yet. Don't want to make promises I can't keep. Coming up next on the show, we have our last interview of the year with Grayson James. And we are going to be talking about the somatic aspect of collaboration, how you can bring the physicality, the Aikido practice, and I love that because I have a whole chapter on emotional Aikido in my book, Composure, and how to bring Aikido practices into the workplace when you collaborate with others. Love it. In the meantime, what I would love to do is to hear from you. What have you loved this year about the show? What would you like to hear more of? How has it been impactful? Anything just to say hi would be nice. You can email me, zoe@zoerouth.com. This is a labor of love. There's a lot of energy that goes into producing this show, and I love hearing from listeners and discovering what is useful and practical for you. I want to do more of that. In the meantime, live well, lead well.
You've been listening to the Zoe Routh Leadership Podcast. To find out more about leadership of the future or to contact Zoe, go to zoerouth.com.